On today's Let's Paint, I'm going to finish painting Bonesylvanian Chibi Mary by Reaper Miniatures. Hi, I'm DizzyAngelDemon and welcome back to my channel. To start off with, I'll be painting that pearl she's holding. You could make this any kind of stone you like, but since Mary's a mermaid, it just makes sense to me that it would be a pearl. So for this, I'll be mixing some Vallejo metallic medium with a touch of ultra pale blue paint. Because this metallic medium is essentially a white pearlescent paint, I want to add just enough blue so that it's not stark white and it ties in nicely with the rest of the figure. I just love this metallic medium because it allows you to take any color of paint you can imagine and turn it into a metallic finish. Next, I'm moving on to the base, and as with the rest of Mary, I wanted to do something a little less traditional. So I went and gave the whole base a nice coat of lilac. Yep, you heard it right, lilac. After that was fully dry, I took some of the lilac and mixed it with a little pale pink to lighten it up, and used that to dry brush all over the base. This is going to bring out all those little details from the sand and stone. The trick to dry brushing is to keep your brush very dry, removing most of the paint onto a scrap of paper towel and gradually building up the color on the raised areas until you reach the desired intensity, keeping in mind to allow areas to fully dry between coats. The good thing is, it won't take very long to dry because you're working with so little paint. Using a very bright green similar to her hair, I'm going to paint that little bit of seaweed on the side of the rocks. While this is drying, I took the same pale pinkish lilac that I used earlier to dry brush and mixed it with some metallic medium. Then I used this to paint the little round stones you see on the base. I thought this was a nice subtle way to make them stand out, and they kind of look like seashells now. It's so pretty when the light reflects off them. Then, using a vibrant pink, I painted the coral on the other side of the base. Here, I'm just dry brushing on some of that bright green over selected areas of the base to mimic moss and give everything a more organic feel. Now, with the dark green wash, I'm applying a thin coat of that over the seaweed to bring out all the details and give it a little more life. Once that dries, I apply another coat of wash to intensify the dark green. Here I'm doing the same thing with the coral, but using a dark pink wash. I'm building it up in select areas to achieve the desired look. Now that my green wash is dry, I can go back in with my bright green and apply some of that to the very edges of the seaweed. This is going to help bring out those details even further and mimic light reflecting off the edges. It's the little attention to details like these that give your mini a real polished look. Here I'm just using a clean damp brush and blending out those wet edges so the light green transitions nicely into the dark areas. And again, I'm going back to the coral and mimicking the same technique using a light pink to bring out the highlights and details. I felt like the green mossy bits didn't stand out enough, so I used that dark green wash and applied a light coat of wash over the areas where I had previously dry brushed green. This adds dimension to those areas, making them look even more like plush bits of moss. After all that was thoroughly dry, I took some of the metal medium, watered it down a bit to make it less opaque, and then very lightly dry brushed all over the base to give it the subtlest hint of shimmer. This has a really nice effect. Once it dries down, it only leaves the occasional bit of micro glitter here and there, and it mimics the sparkle you might see from the sun reflecting off sand. And finally, moving on to her face. I decided to give her some cute candy pink lips, so I'm very carefully applying the slightest bit of pink to her lips. Diluting your paint a little really helps to keep the paint flowing while you work on these tiny areas. Here I'm painting in Mary's eye area with a dark blue-green color to create shadows and depth around the outer edge of her eyes. Now, with some white paint that I've diluted ever so slightly, I'm going to paint the whites of her eyes. The white paint should be diluted enough to be a little transparent so you can gradually build up the color, but not so diluted that you lose control of the paint and you end up with more of a wash. The trick is to apply thin controlled coats and build it up in the areas you want to be more opaque. I want the whites to be more intense towards the center and fade out towards the edges. This way it will blend nicely with the shadows around the edges. Taking that same dark blue-green, I'm going to map out where her iris will go. I decide what direction Mary will be looking, in this case straight forward, and then I start by mapping out where I want the iris to be. It's easier to match up the eyes and position them properly if you just map it out first with a small dot and then build it up once they're looking even. You really want to take your time here to make sure both eyes match before moving on. Now, with a very pale blue-green, I'm going to paint in the center of each iris, leaving a thin border of the dark green around the edges. Keep in mind that although the iris goes beyond the upper eyelid, you want to make sure to leave some of that dark color along the whole upper eyelid as a shadow. Take your time and try to make the outline as even as possible. With the dark pink, almost red color, I'm going to paint in her pupils. The pupils should be positioned touching the top edge of her eyes and coming down from there so that it appears that part of the pupil is being covered by the upper eyelid. Take your time and very carefully start filling them in, leaving a decent amount of that pale blue for the iris. And finally, I'm going to finish it all off by adding that iconic dot of shine to each eye with a touch of white paint. You can use a brush if you like, but sometimes I prefer the control of a pointed toothpick. Just make sure you don't have too much paint on it. Now apply a small dot of white to each eye on the side where the light would be hitting, and try to put the dot on the same place in each eye. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind that I completely overlooked when I was painting Mary is that if there's anything else on your mini that has a dot of shine on it, like let's say the stone in her crown, the dots of shine should all be on the same side in relatively the same position, unless for some reason there are multiple light sources illuminating your figure. This little attention to detail really makes a difference, and it's going to make your mini much more believable. Because at the end of it all, what we really want is for our minis to look the best they can. Please let me know in the comments below what you think of my painted Bonesylvanian Mary. And just a quick shout out and big thank you to Reaper Miniatures for providing me with this totally awesome mini to paint. If you're into painting miniatures and want to get all kinds of awesome tips and tricks to step up your game, then you're going to want to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and share with your friends. Thanks for watching, have yourself a great day, and be sure to join me next time. Bye!